Slack channel. I want everyone to please respond to that. Just type in there. I can hear you. I can listen. I can, whatever. Just put in there. Thank you very much. Because I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. All right. Now, joining the masterclass every weekend. So that's also very important. If you don't join, you miss out certain opportunities. Now, the opportunity that you're going to be missing out is the fact that I'm going to make this highly interactive, highly engaging, because it's not just about listening to me teach you or watching me do things. I want you to do that. I want you to acquire the skills. So you're going to have access to servers. You're going to have access to tools and things. And sometimes I'm actually going to ask you to do the things that I'm supposed to do. Okay. So because we're quite a few number, whoever gets there first, really. So it's important for you to give me all your attention, because this thing, especially when you're new to IT, right? So it's very important for you to understand, get someone to explain things to you, and then practice. Practice is really important, okay? So yes, don't joke with the masterclass every weekend sessions, all right? Now, what's the end goal of this after 13 weeks? What are we trying to do? Now, we're going to build an entire corporate infrastructure in AWS cloud. Someone is asking for the Zoom, so please. Or if anyone can help. Okay. So we're going to build an entire corporate infrastructure. Now, this is literally what companies have going on out there. Okay. It's not some hello world type of thing. It's something that you can literally take the code that you're going to write. You can literally take that into your new employment when you get a job and start making references to it. You can compare it to whatever you meet there, and you find out that it's all the same. So we're going to build a true enterprise grade infrastructure. Then we're going to automate our build and release of both infrastructure and applications. So all these things we're going to do in the next 13 weeks. So we're going to be building applications, we're going to be building infrastructure, we're going to be releasing them and seeing the whole agility we're talking about. Then we're going to implement some advanced security stuff for both infrastructure and applications, because at the end of the day, this is all about applications. DevOps is all about applications. Now, There are certain arm that are beginning to show off now in the whole world of IT. So there's DevOps, Data Ops, ML Ops, and DevSec Ops, and a few of those different ops. The whole idea remains the same: development and operations. So fusing them together and making them able to work together to cause this agility we're talking about. Because before DevOps, development teams were in their own world. Infrastructure team, which is also the operations, were in their own world, and there was people working in silos. And whenever things are going on this side, it's not really clear about it, and so they don't trust it. It's an application where say, hey, no, have you coded enough? What sort of strategy do you have? You know, all those questions, and then they set up meetings, change management meetings, and that goes on and on for weeks and months. Sometimes, you know, there's a whole lot going. But because they're all together, we're all aware of what's going on from day one. From day one, we're all aware of what's going on, right? So for that reason, we trust the release process. We trust the fact that there is something we call continuous integration. So we're continually deploying applications in the pipeline that has automated testing and all sort of quality gates and so many things. And then we can just hit a button, build the software, package it, release it, and everyone's happy. So we'll be implementing all that into our application and infrastructure. Then we'll be doing logging and tracing and monitoring of the applications, because at the end of the day, when a new project starts and we have written our code, the developers have written, the DevOps guy written the code, they've supported the application developers, and then we need to start monitoring, because if we don't monitor, we wouldn't know when things go wrong. We don't want to be reactive, we want to be proactive. Now, monitoring means capturing a lot of data, okay? So we'll capture a lot of data, which we can then analysis. We can even do some learning stuff. Some will help us understand possible failures in the future. I've seen that happen where uh, teams engage when they're scared to be down, and they can plan ahead for that. That's the power of monitoring. And then tracing. The application is nice. Go through so microservice, from the word micro, means rather than having client application, application having maybe 10 microservices. In some organizations, you can have one software with hundreds of microservices. The reason for tracing is something goes wrong with one microservice, we want to be able to trace where the problem is. Because even though a particular microservice has complained, errored out, or telling us it has a problem, in reality, its problem may actually be caused by another application. But when there is tracing, it means we're able to trace where the problem is coming from, and we can quickly and respond to that and fix things. So that's what tracing is all about. So monitoring, tracing, they may sound alike, but they're actually quite different. And then logging. Logging is the fact that we're logging every single event that occur on our website or application. If someone tries to log in, that's an event. We capture that. If there is a password failure that occurs, that's an event. Capture that. So we don't only capture that, we capture all sorts of information about that. For example, who's trying to log in, from which browser is it, what's the IP address, what's the location, how many times has it tried to log in. All these things are part of monitoring, and that is logging. Okay. Now, even though applications generate logs, sometimes we don't want to store everything, so we get to filter what we want. It's all part of logging, and then we also get to see how all of that works. So by the end of 13 weeks, you will have a lot to write about, to talk about, to say about, and it's important for you to build your resume as you go along. So we're going to be doing project 1 to 3 today. What I would like you to do is to start building your resume as we go along. Now, I actually forgot, I intended to show my CV tonight to give you an idea of the structure that I have been using for many years, still using the same structure. It works for me. Recruiters call me all the time. Right now, I just ignore them. I don't even respond to them. It's just because it's too much. Now, that CV is a not only because I have the skill set, but also if I have a skill set and I don't have quality resume that gives the recruiter an idea of who I am, then they wouldn't even call me in the first place. So resume is very important. Having a quality resume is very important. So I stress this a lot because that is your face. Before someone calls you and know who you are, they want to read about you. And, so that's very important. Now, because you might miss out some things when you do need to start putting your CV together. That's the reason why, as we go along, it's very important for you to build your CV as you go along. So I'm going to give you a template as well, so that every time we do a project, you learn something, you pick up a new tool, dump it in there. At the end, when you're ready to start looking for work, then we will then rearrange it properly and make it look really nice and lovely. Okay. Yes, definitely. I will. Oops. I'm hearing a lot of echo. Why? I think someone needs to mute themselves. So let me see. Okay. I think. Oh, no. I'm hearing my. Okay. Let me stop sharing because every time I share. Okay,
recording stopped.
I want to get this what is it called? This echo thing out of the way. All right, can everyone hear me? I think the echo is gone now. I wonder why it came up before, but
Yeah, I can hear you.
okay, brilliant. Thank you. All righty. So let me share my screen again. Before I do that, let me hit the record button.
Recording in progress.
Because each time that happens, each time I share my screen, I don't see okay. That's okay. Someone is messing about with me. All right, let me okay, sharing my screen back. All right. So back to our discussion on resume and all that. So yes, I will share my CV tomorrow. I'd actually present it. Actually, maybe I can do that now. Let me see. Oh yeah, there we go. Just to give you an idea of what what your template is going to look like, and I'm going to share that with you. Okay, so it's very, very important. First of all, a short profile, okay, of yourself, and then technologies and experience. So this is where you get to talk about some of the things that you have worked on. Now, trust me, you don't have to have done everything like in total, right? Sorry, sometimes I'll sound Nigerian because I am. So in total is like proper, yeah. So for the sake of those who are not Nigerians and listening to me, but basically, you don't have to have done these things deeply before you can put them on your CV. And I'll tell you how you can defend that when you go for interviews. Even if it's about installing an application, looking at the UI and just having a basic understanding of its architecture, you can put that on your CV because yes, it is an experience. Okay. So you put a list here. Okay. When you go for interview and someone says to you, oh, say for example, CloudFormation, you haven't done CloudFormation, you've done more of Terraform. Okay. And someone is saying to you, okay, I've got some CloudFormation questions to ask you. Have you worked on CloudFormation? You haven't actually extensively worked on it, but you've done a bit of work on it. All you have to do is talk about what you've done with it. Okay, you talk about what you've done with it. If they ask you questions, rather than answering the question directly as it affects CloudFormation, because Terraform is an alternative to CloudFormation, what you need to do is to explain how it works in Terraform as an alternative. This is very important. The reason for this is, and you make it clear to them that, well, I understand what you're asking. I haven't done it extensively in CloudFormation, but this is how to do it in Terraform. The reason is because they want to understand that you understand the differences between technologies. There's a whole lot of them. Okay. They want to understand that you're not confused about what technology is doing what, and you're able to differentiate and you're able to clearly talk about the differences between them and how it works between one or the other. If they ask you questions about things you don't know, if you know the alternative to that, by all means, go ahead and give that alternative and say to them how it works in that alternative. Okay, it makes it very easy that way. Now, after you've made a list of technologies and experience, now you start talking about your employment history, and then you talk about the projects that you've implemented. You talk about the next opportunities that you've worked on, the company you work with. You know, my CV is in public domain anyway, so there's nothing to hide about this. Yeah. So, and I'm going to share with everyone. You can literally take this and then use it to adjust your CV. So every time we do things on a project, just write it. Initially, it's going to be rough. It can't just be a bullet point like this. Keep adding the bullet point. When we're ready to start putting your CV together, we're just going to start pasting, adjusting, putting your experience there. I know a lot of people don't actually have the experience initially, but that's where we come in, because we're going to help you put your CV in an order that actually reflects the fact that you have that experience, because you're going to go through that experience. Okay. Now, and then if you have any certification, by all means, you can put it somewhere down below. If you don't, it doesn't matter. It's not very important. As you can see, I wrote these certifications in 2020. Many years I've been doing this. I never had, all of these certifications. I actually wrote the certifications because of this training, so that people that we're training would have the trust that we can actually deliver. So it's actually not for employment. So, but if you have, put it there. If you don't have, it doesn't matter. But do plan to write your certification. It's always very good, especially for those in the US. Yeah, for some reason in the US, they sort of like it, but in the UK, they don't really care. as long as you can do the job. But I'll send this CV to you guys, and you can actually um, use it for yourself. Now, what tools and technology stack will I become highly skilled at? Now, the list is quite exhaustive. All right. Is this how to spell quite? I don't know. But anyway, so we're going to be going through Linux administration. Oops. Okay. Thank you for unmuting yourself. Linux administration, AWS Cloud, Ansible, Terraform, Jenkins, Nginx, MySQL, Apache, Docker, Kubernetes, Helm, SonarQube, Artifactory, Console, LDAP, TLS, SSL, Vault, Grafana, Prometheus, Elasticsearch, Kibana, Logstash, Firebase, Metrobase, PHP, Java. Now, some of them will go deep, deep, deep. Some of them will not. We'll just touch base on them. It doesn't matter. It's fine. And some I haven't even listed out here because I couldn't even remember when I was making the list. But you will definitely touch base on all of these, and you will understand how they relate to DevOps. Now, how to get the best out of this program? This is very important. You have two options. It's either as I am showing you how to do things, you are also following along, all right? And then maybe after today's session, tomorrow morning, you pick it up, you try to practice it, you keep on going at the same pace that I'm going. Now, to some people, that can work for you. Now, to some other people, it may not work for you. You might say, okay, you know what? I'm just going to listen. I'm just going to listen to the masterclass and watch the videos. Very important. It's very important that you watch the videos alongside as you're listening, because next week is going to come and we're going to have this session again, and we're going to do some projects. If you don't watch those videos, you're going to get lost somewhere. And I don't want you to get lost. I really want everyone to get to the end of this, because it's not about starting. It's not about having everyone on the session today. It's actually about how many people actually get to finish. Okay? So choose the right strategy that works for you. If you're going to be following along and you feel like you can cope, and that means before next week, Saturday and Sunday, you have watched the relevant videos and you have implemented the project. If you can implement the project ahead, meaning before we join the session next week, you've done the project for next week, thumbs up to you. That's very good. But if that doesn't work for you, don't do it. Okay, know what works for you. You can watch the videos and just listen to me. After the 3-month masterclass, then you can start implementing your project. You can just give yourself like a month extra to then implement the project. Okay, that may work for some people, that may not work for some. It's just like when I was in school back home in Nigeria. Some people, my colleague, my friends in school, some of them will wake up in the middle of the night reading. We call it jacking, like they would read it. It never worked. It never worked for me. If I should wake up in the middle of the night to read, I am messed up the next day. So I knew that. So I never woke up in the middle of the night to read. And it didn't mean that I failed my exam. As a matter of fact, I passed way more than some people that were, studying in the middle of the night. So what's most important is for you to please understand what works for you and stick to it. It's okay to pivot, okay? If it's not working for you, you can pivot and then choose the strategy that actually works for you. Yes, please maintain the log here. Thanks, Olashile, because I'm actually not seeing the Zoom chat. So if you put anything in the Zoom chat, I'm not seeing it at all. So if you need to chat, make sure you're using the Masterclass Slack channel, okay? Very important. Now, there's an important tip I put there. Always watch the videos preceding the project. So I said that before. I'm putting it here. And I, as you can see, it's in red. It's very important because I don't want you to struggle. If you don't do that, you might encounter problems that you cannot solve. And then you start booking one-to-one sessions and all that. And you shouldn't be doing that, because DevOps engineers solve problems. When you start working, you're going to be solving problems. And before you can solve problem for someone, you need to understand what you're solving, right? So if you don't understand the concept, it's going to be hard for you to solve. And the only way you can understand is to listen to someone teach you, watch videos, join these sessions, ask questions. Okay. All right. Then this is just like, I don't know. I was just thinking, I just decided to put it there. Learning a new skill is hard generally. It doesn't matter. It's not just about anything. It's just like if I decide now that I want to start learning Chinese, I don't speak Chinese. As a matter of fact, when I see Chinese language written, I have no clue. But it doesn't mean that I can't learn it. If I decide I want to start learning it, I can learn it. But it's going to be hard initially. All I need is focus, tenacity, interest, passion, constant learning, and then I'll get there. It's a matter of time. If I start in today, get someone to mentor me and all that, in maybe 2 years, 3 years, I'll start speaking Chinese. Hopefully I can get to that. Right. So, so it doesn't matter. Stay focused, get yourself determined, and then follow the recommended guidelines. I'm giving you certain recommendations. Please follow it and you'll be fine. Then live session rules. So there will be a lot of interactions and access to servers. Do not exploit it. Do not hack into our servers. You would have access to some servers. Now, remain today, but from tomorrow going forward, your first name is what you would use to access a server. So if I'm working on a particular project and I need you to access that server to do anything, all you have to do is just SSH into it with your first name, and you'll be able to have access to it. The private key that we're going to be using, I will put it in the chat on Slack as well, so that we can reuse the same private key, everyone. And then all this private key, public key thing, we'll talk about all of that so you can understand. All right. So, and then what's this? The first person to request to work on a task gets the opportunity to do so. Therefore, what such opportunities? Sometimes, because we're about 40 people in this session, right? So if, let's say, I need someone to check the logs and tell me what's going on. Maybe we're trying to troubleshoot something's not going on right or anything. You all have access to the server. So whoever gets there first, whoever, get to do it first, gets the opportunity. So always look out for such opportunities. Keep your mind open. And it's going to be highly interactive and engaging. And that's the way it's going to work. All right. Okay. All right. So the last thing I said, you will be allowed only a maximum of 3. Okay. So now this is just my thinking in terms of fair opportunity. So let's say, for example, someone has attempted 3 times already, and there are other people that want to try, and then you get to say it first. I would then not give you the chance to do it. I'll just say someone else should go ahead and do it. So please understand that I'm not being partial or anything. It's just so everyone gets a fair chance. All right. So we've actually gone through this short PowerPoint. I promise you, we're not going to be doing a lot of PowerPoints. This is a highly hands-on thing. Okay, so I believe everyone have access to, where is it? Let me bring it up. I believe everyone have access to this. So do you have AWS account? And do you have access to this project implementation for direct apply? Let me move this away. Okay. So please confirm. I need everyone. We have about 45 people, 47 now. I need everyone to respond to me. It's very important. Okay. If you don't have access to this site, the account, please reach out to Solomon. so that he can sort you out. You need to have access and you need to be able to navigate to your dashboard and all that. And then your AWS, if you don't have access to AWS today, that's fine. After this session, you can go ahead and create one. There's a video on that. So if you need help, you can always reach out and you get help. Okay. And by the way, we're all here to learn. I'm here to learn too. Trust me. And I mean this. Sometimes I'm going to run into errors and you're going to be the one to help me out. So don't see me as someone who, almighty know it all. Nah, we're all here to learn. So we have to help each other. Now, within this masterclass, if anyone has problems, feel free to jump on it. Okay, jump on it. Like someone is posting, what's it called? Someone is posting a screenshot asking for help in the dev camp channel or the masterclass channel. If you know the answer, get on there, help the person. It works. Okay, and you're going to be doing that when you start working because, like I said before, DevOps engineers solve problems, and you're going to be working with developers, and developers are always going to be coming to you for help, and you're going to be helping them from time to time. Okay. So what we're going to be doing today is implementing 3 projects. Now, all 3 projects are going to be based on web stack implementation. And what does that mean? Like I said before, it's all about deploying applications, whether it's a mobile application or web-based application. DevOps is all about releasing software, getting applications available, and that's it. Okay, apart from all the other whistles around it. But in a nutshell, it's about your customers being able to go on the browser, hit the website, and they're able to get response. That's all this is all about. So securing it, making it possible, making it accessible is all we're going to be doing. There are tools that allows us to do it. There are things to think about. We have to think about data, because applications is all about data. When you sign up to a website, you're giving them some data about yourself, your name. Sometimes they take your date of birth, your location, your phone number. It's all about data. So we have to keep the data somewhere. We have to then think about the storage of that data. So how do we want to keep the data? Do we want to store it on disk? Do we want to store it in some remote location? When it's time to recover from a data breach or data loss or whatever, how do we do all of that? Even though there are other engineers, database administrators that take care of things like that, but we as DevOps engineers, we still play a certain role. Okay, we play a certain role to automate some of the things that they get to do. Okay, so first of all, we are going to implement the first 3 web stacks. Now, the first one, which is the LAMP stack, is just an acronym for Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP, or Python, or Perl. So let's start with the last 3. You see, all these are programming languages, okay? Software development is about writing some code to make a website possible or mobile application. Okay. Now these languages come in different flavors. So there's PHP. PHP was actually the language that Facebook started with. So they started their website with with PHP. But today they have a lot of technologies running behind it. And there's so many websites that are actually based on PHP. I mean, even our website, Direct is based on PHP. So there's a whole lot of people that use PHP. WordPress, if you're familiar with it, is actually based off of PHP. Then there's Python. Python is another language, multi-purpose. It can serve as a scripting language. It can serve as an object-oriented language. It can serve as a functional language. Remember, I said before that there are different angles to programming. When I was trying to encourage you not to be scared about programming. So there's different things you can do with all these programming languages. And Python is one that actually fits the bill for so many things. Some languages focus on just one angle, all right? But Python is like multi-purpose and it's highly efficient. So people even use it for data science. You know, most of all this artificial intelligence that you see around are actually being powered by Python, you know, because it has a lot of libraries that allows such data analysis, machine learning to happen. Now, Perl is an old language, but it's still relevant. So any stack that has a combination of Linux, Apache, MySQL, and any of these P's is what is considered as LAMP. Okay. Some DevOps job descriptions that you will find would actually request that or require that you have some LAMP experience. So that's what we're going to be doing today. And whatever we do today or in the course of this, trust me, it is an experience that you can proudly be happy to talk about when you start facing any company that requires that. Now, Linux is an operating system. So if you watched some of the Linux videos in the dashboard, you would understand some things about it. But it's essentially that layer on your computer that allows the hardware and the software to operate together. If there is no operating system on your laptop, Zoom will not be able to work and you won't be able to see me. So your laptop is just a hardware. Your mouse is just a hardware. Your keyboard, they're all just hardware. But there has to be a layer that Zoom as an application would need to interact with the hardware. All right. Now, what do I mean by that? I've been trying to share my screen the whole time. Every time I click share, something happens. It's either you guys see my screen or the network just goes off, something happens. But share screen that I'm clicking on is actually on Zoom as an application. But then the operating system takes that instruction and then allows you to be able to see it on the screen. Without the operating system, Zoom is not going to be able to understand what my mouse has clicked on. My mouse clicked on share screen. It is the operating system that allows that understanding to happen between the hardware and the software. Okay, it's just like when we're typing on our keyboard into Slack. If you type something and you hit send, how do you think it works? That's on your keyboard, you see letter G and it shows up on the screen as G. And then you hit on send, it goes. It is the operating system at work. Now, most laptops use Windows operating system, right? You have Windows 10. Back in the days, we used to have Windows 7 and, you know, XP and all that. Now it's Windows 10. I think there is Windows 15 now. I don't know. Windows 11. I don't know. But they're all operating system. Okay. Windows is an operating system. But why are we not talking about Windows here? Why are we talking about Linux? That's because Windows is known for what we call a client operating system. It's more of a client operating system in the sense that it is not optimized for production workload. It is optimized for personal use. And sometimes they call it PC, isn't it? Personal computer, right? They don't call it server. There's a reason why when companies deploy their applications to some servers, they don't say, oh, we've deployed our application to a computer. They say we've deployed our application to a server. That's because the operating system on that computer has been designed to handle heavy workload. Think about this. Facebook serves, I think, billions of users all over the world. What do you think will happen to a computer to receive traffic of that huge amount of workload? It's going to crash, right? But you can leave your powerful Linux operating system run for months without restarting it. Try that with your Windows laptop, right? After like a month or so, you start seeing Windows complaining, hanging, doing this or that, and then you have to do what? Restart your PC, and then everything comes back to normal. When you restart it, it flushes out some cache, and then everything starts working back again. So that's because your Windows PC is not optimized to run for a long time. It's not optimized to do heavy lifting kind of work. Linux is lightweight, okay? And that's the reason why it's mostly come on, Linux, where are you? Let me drag this away. It's probably hiding behind one of my, okay, you know what? I have another, let me use my Visual Studio Code. Okay, so this, so forget about all the text you're looking at, okay? Forget about all of that. I'm gonna drag this up, all right? Now, I'm gonna type a command here, just say top, okay? And then it's going to show all this. You see, this screen right here that I can type something in and then it pulls back some data. This is your Linux terminal, okay? And it doesn't have the possibility to click things like you have your Windows. On Windows, you can right click, copy, paste, do all that. You cannot do that on a Linux server, all right? There are Linux operating systems that have desktop, okay? So don't get them mixed up. Any operating system that has a GUI, so GUI is graphical user interface, GUI. Any computer that has a GUI like that is considered as a desktop. So yes, Linux also have some flavors that have desktop, just like Windows, okay? But the Linux that is being used by DevOps engineers, by companies deploying their applications, they do not have a GUI. All they have is a terminal. Now, why is it that they have, is it that they just want it to be difficult for people? No, it's just because those extra GUI that you see is an unnecessary overhead to the system. So taking them out allows your server to be lightweight and much more secure, because when you start adding more functionalities and GUI and all that, there are actually programs that allows GUI to be available. And when you write programs, you import libraries, you reuse certain modules. What is a library? What is a module? So rather than reinventing the wheel and writing the code from scratch, most of the time what they do is they import libraries, they reuse libraries to make certain functionalities to work. Now, when you do that, the more third-party libraries to use, the more vulnerability you would have. Okay, the more risk it is, because you don't know the inside out of the libraries that you're working with. Okay, now the guy who wrote that library could actually put some bug inside that will jeopardize your PC and will through the back be able to get into your computer and do some malicious activities. So that's the reason why Linux is considered much more highly secure, because it doesn't have most of the irrelevant libraries and modules. And so most companies tend to use it a lot. Now, there are different flavors of Linux. There's Ubuntu, CentOS, Red Hat, Kali Linux, and so many used for different purposes. But at the end of the day, it serves the same purpose, which is to serve as an operating system that applications too. I just want to be a little conscious of time. I just want to have a quick look at what the time says. 1 second. And not to worry, I'm just taking my time to explain things. We're going to get there. We're definitely going to do everything that we are set out to do. So we spent about an hour and a half now. Let's see how far we can get. And let me know if you are tired, if you want us to stop, if you want us to carry on, please do let me know. So Obina is asking a question: do I have to install Linux on my workstation, or would I have access to it on my AWS account? So basically, you can rely on AWS to give you Linux. Okay, so you're going to use a tool called a client tool that would enable you to access a server remotely. Now, these are concepts that are sort of difficult at first, but you get to understand them over time. Okay, so you don't have to install Linux on your laptop. You're going to get it from AWS, and I'm going to show you now. I'm a bit cold, so I just want to shut the window. I'm actually going to do that from the back. Okay, apologies. So let's start with the first one. And go on. Okay, I was just explaining Linux. Let me face Apache. So someone is asking me, is there a preference of AWS over Azure? Now, this particular training is focused on AWS, not Azure. And I actually did a video on Instagram about choosing between AWS or Azure or anything like that. First of all, AWS still leads the market when it comes to public cloud. And I choose to focus on AWS because of the demand. It makes logical sense, because I don't want to be looking for work and find out that I have a skill set that is okay. So I was just disconnected. I hope you can still hear me though. Let me share my screen again. All right. Please send message in the chat box if you can still hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. I can hear you.
Right. Great, thank you. Okay, so all right, brilliant. So yeah, I was talking about AWS, Azure, and all that. So yeah, so I tend to focus more because of the demand, but obviously in some locations, some public cloud providers are actually more relevant. So depending on where you are, In some countries, Azure, which is Microsoft's public cloud offering, they've actually gone ahead just because AWS cannot be everywhere at the same time. Before AWS takes the lead, they've gone there to try to take the lead. And, so if you're in such locations, you can actually consider Azure, okay, if Azure is number one where you are. But in most countries that I know, AWS is still taking the lead, and they're always coming out with new features, trying to get better and better. And every other person is just playing the catch-up game, copying from their technologies. By the way, Microsoft is known in, but they're also good at copying other people's technologies. I mean, this is what a lot of people say. It's my opinion as well about them. So yeah. And by the way, I used to be a Microsoft person when I started my career. I did a couple of certifications in Microsoft products, but later on decided to move to the other side. But yeah, so that's it really. So Apache, what is Apache? Apache is a web server. So something has to render your application code. You can write your code in PHP, Python, Perl, or whatever. But at the end of the day, code is just a bunch of text. Now you can write a code. I mean, not you, I mean developers, because that's not what DevOps engineers do. Developers would write their code. For example, you can see how nicely written this web page is. At the end of the day, it's just some text behind it. But what is allowing us to run the PHP code to give us, this blue? And you can see when I hover over it, it has some effects. When I hover here, it has some effects, blue and all that. That's the web server that allows us to render the application code. Okay, so we do need Apache to serve as the web server. That's why they call it web server. Now, it can be used as a web server. It can also be used as a reverse proxy or as a load balancer. And you're going to see all of that along the line as we go along, with the whole implementation. So load balancer basically means that there is one server in front that receives the traffic, and then it takes the traffic and then loads it across multiple other servers behind it. We'll get to see that in action. Reverse proxy, it takes the request and basically just forwards it on to an upstream server that then renders the page. There are reasons for these sort of implementations and configurations, and we're going to talk about all of that as we go along. What we're going to do today is just implement a basic implementation of a web stack, very basic. And then gradually we'll begin to advance on top of it and see the different use cases and how they're being implemented. So how do we go ahead? I'm not going to read word for word all of this. Please take your time to read all of this. I have taken the pain to write this documentation because I know it's going to be useful to you and it's what you need. Okay, if you can follow all of this, you get to get the gist over time. So study what Sdlc means. It's just software delivery life cycle, the sort of cycle that it takes from software to go all the way to production and all that. So let's start some implementation. So I have my AWS right here. So AWS has this concept of regions and availability zones and all that. So it basically means data centers in different places. Now, before we talk about that, let's talk about cloud. Because now we're talking about the cloud. Let's talk about it. What are they doing? What products are they offering? And what they're offering is just the fact that you don't have to buy computers anymore. It's as simple as that. You don't have to buy computers. You can just log in and you can get yourself a virtual computer that will work exactly as though it were a physical computer. Back in the days before cloud, if I wanted to start a business like Diary.io website, I'd have to buy a server, I could put it somewhere in my house, and then put my application code on there and make it available for people to access. And then people can start going into the, reaching the IP address of that server and then see the page. That was exactly how the likes of Google, Facebook, they all started. They all started from their garage. They put their servers there and then put the application code on there. And then people start, visiting their web page, and it resolves into the IP address of the servers. But nowadays with cloud, you don't have to do that anymore. Companies can literally create an account. Okay, you can sign up for an account and then choose the data center that you want. So they have data centers all over the place. And what is a data center? A data center is just a place where they pack servers. Let's have a look online. Data center, Google. So look, data center, images. And this is what a data center is. So basically I hope you can see my screen. Okay. Now, what this means is, you see, these are racks of servers. Each of these is a server. Okay. If you've seen a desktop computer before, those desktop computers, if you go to a cyber cafe, then, that computer that they put under the desk. Now, think about placing it like this, all right? And then there's now slotted into that. So that's basically what it is. So it's, those PCs that we used to call desktop computers, but this time around, these are servers, and then they pack them all like that, okay? Now, AWS have these in different locations. Now, if I'm in London and I need to rent some servers to put my applications on there, all I need to do is to request for a server at the nearest location to where I am or to where my customers are. If I intend to release my software and most of the users are going to be in the US, there's no point putting my server in a location that is in London, even though I live in London. My customer base is in the US, then I get to use servers in that region. So that's basically what regions are all about, okay? And it doesn't matter whether it's AWS or Azure or GCP, they all share the same concept. If you learn AWS and you want to pick up Azure skills later on, it's just a month of watching a few videos. The same concepts apply. Even with AWS, with Azure and all the other guys, they also have regions in different locations. So you get to choose. So today I'm going to be using, first of all, I think I have a number of servers running. Let me just shut those down. And by the way, make sure you do not have your servers running. Otherwise, you're going to be incurring some cost. Okay. Okay, so I don't have in this region, I think it's in Frankfurt. All right, so terminate. Okay, so I don't need the servers anymore. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, let's go to Virginia. So that's where I'm going to be putting this LAMP stack. So I'm assuming that this LAMP stack is going to serve customers in the US that are close to Virginia. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch an instance. Let's launch an instance. An instance means, so they use instance because it's actually a programming concept. So if you're familiar with object-oriented programming, you understand that when you have a certain thing, let me call it a thing. Actually, let me use, okay, I'm going to use my bunch of keys to explain this, okay? Now, these two keys right here, they're actually the same. It's that they look the same, right? So let's assume that they're both Linux servers. This is an instance of a Linux server. This is another instance. So, and basically, I'm trying not to use certain words. I was going to say like a replica, but it's actually not a replica, but it's just a copy. Let me put it that way. Yeah, that's a better word, copy. So if I need a server, I need a copy of a Linux server. That's basically what we're about to do. Now, a distribution of Linux is Ubuntu, and that's what I'm going to be using here. So let's search for Ubuntu. But let me go back so that we're all still on the same page. And I just want to confirm that this is still being recorded. Solomon, can you please confirm that the recording is going on? Everyone else can also please confirm and put it in the chat before I proceed. Okay, so this is the dashboard of AWS. Once you log in, you basically have this, and then you can have these different categories because they have different solutions that they provide. So if I minimize all of this, these are the categories. Thank you very much. These are the categories of the different solutions being provided by AWS. Now, instances represent the servers. You can actually have Windows servers as well. So even though we've talked about Windows being used mostly for desktop client usage, they actually have their own servers as well. So there's Windows Server. They name them in years, Windows Server 2003, 2000, 2016, 12, and all that. So they do the same thing that Linux servers do. Some people deploy their applications on Windows servers, but just bear in mind that it has GUI and all that. But the good thing, again, is recently Windows have started creating their own distribution of Linux, and that's some really important steps forward. All right, so we're going to create an instance of a Linux server. So under this arrow here, you can see instance types, launch templates, bot requests, all these things, you get to understand what times. So don't, today, all we just want to do is we just want to create an instance of a Linux server. So if I click on launch instance, I'm going to search for Ubuntu. I want to make sure it's in the free tier only. And the reason for that is so that I don't get charged, right? So you can create instances in the free tier. Bear in mind, the free tier has limitations in terms of size. So by the time you start doing some heavy duty work in the course of the project, the instances in the free tier will not be applicable because companies don't deploy free tier instances into production. So sometimes we're going to be doing things production grade, and you want to get a feel of what's happening. For now, it's okay. So we're going to use free tier, and we're going to search for Ubuntu. Okay, there's different versions. The 16.04, 18.04. The latest one at the moment is 20.04. I'm not sure if there is a 22 or so, but 20.04 is good enough. So I'm going to select that. And you can see here there are a number of options that you need to select. So the first thing is to choose an AMI. AMI means Amazon Machine Image. Okay. Remember when I talked about an instance being a copy of a server? It's an image. So to create another copy, we're going to need an image, which is the base, right? So the base is what we're going to use to create a copy. If I wanted to create a copy of this key and I take it to a locksmith, they're going to need this key to replicate it, right? That's exactly what's going on here. So we have chosen the image. So what we selected previously here is the image. So this is Ubuntu image. You can see here, AMI, this is the name for this AMI, all right? And there should be some place that it talks about the fact that it's a machine image, but if it doesn't, that's fine. And we've selected that, so we can go into the next one here. And what we want to do is we want to choose instance. If you look at this, it says free tier eligible. So like I said before, it has limitations. So the type is T2.micro. So they've named them differently. So there's T2.x large, T3.nano. They're just given them names to differentiate them based on the capacity of each of the servers. Now for the T2.micro, it has just one virtual CPU. Okay, so this is the column for virtual CPUs. Some servers have 2, some have 8, 4, and all that. So in this case, we have just 1. Okay, and CPU is like the brain. Oh, okay. Someone is saying I should enlarge the AWS screen. Okay, I don't know if this is big enough. And does that affect everyone else? Okay. I hope that is good. I hope your screen is not small as well. So if you're watching from a very small screen, I have a really large screen, so I can see it very clearly. But if yours is small, you're watching this from your phone, it may not be very good. All right, so we are going to select T2.micro. One virtual CPU is fine, and CPU, it's think of it as the brain of the computer. That's where computation happens. All right. So if you ask the computer to compute 2 plus 2, it uses the CPU power to be able to do that. So the more complex your application is, the more CPU is going to require. Okay. And then the memory. So the memory here is not storage. This is where people also get things confused when they're still just starting out into IT generally. So storage is different from memory. Okay, here's the differences. The memory is a volatile storage. So it is a storage, it's just that it's volatile. Okay, it doesn't last, but it's fast. So they both have their pros and cons. Okay, now storage on the other hand, you can have huge amounts of it. It lasts long, it's durable, but it's slow because it takes time for your applications to take a trip to the storage to get data back and forth. And that's what we call input output. So you're going to be seeing a lot of input, output, or IO from time to time. Okay, that's what it means when there's request for data and you get an output from it, or you're pushing data somewhere, that's the whole input output. So when you have data on a storage device, okay, if you're pulling it from it, you're taking a trip there, it takes a bit of time to do that. So it's quite expensive. It's quite expensive in terms of the journey it takes, but it's cheaper because you have a lot of it. Now, memory, on the other hand, is like our brain. Okay, it's like human brain. We don't get to remember everything. As a matter of fact, I choose not to remember things because I don't have enough storage. So some things I just flush them off my head so that I can give enough, space for other information to come through. And that's exactly what's happening here. So In this case, our memory is just going to be 1 gig. So that means your applications can fit more than a gig of worth of data. But we're going to get to the point where we'll have storage soon, which is this one right here. Okay. So with storage, we can have more of it and it's not expensive. So the more memory we get, you can see here 32 is T2 2x large. This is going to be an expensive virtual machine. If we selected this, Amazon will be charging us a lot per minute. I don't know how they charge, but that's how they charge. Literally, the more you use the servers, the more you get to pay. But this is on the free tier, and we don't get to pay. Now, bear in mind, when you create an account, it's not free forever. So what you're given is 750 hours. If you exhaust your 750 hours, that's the end of it. Beyond that, they're going to charge you, okay? Or if you don't exhaust the 750 hours, but you've had your account for more than a year, after 1 year, they're going to start charging you. So whichever one comes first, okay? So bear that in mind. Now, we're going to proceed, and then the next thing is to configure our instance. Did I actually select that? Okay, yeah, that's been, so I can say next, configure our instance. Here, we can request for as much as we want. If I wanted maybe 100 servers, all I just need to do is put the number. Now, I believe you're beginning to see the power of the cloud, right? Because now I don't have to think about buying 100 Dell computers because I need to start up a business. I just come to AWS, put in the number that I want, boom, servers are ready, deploy my applications, boom, business has started, right? That's how it works. In this case, we just need just one. Now you can leave everything at the to go through all of this in terms of networks, subnet. Do not worry about all of this right now. You're going to do projects. There's a project 15 that actually focuses a lot on this part. Okay, so leave everything at default and just go to the next one, add storage. So this is where I was talking about the storage. So there's different types of storage. You can have the general purpose, GP2, GP3, and then there's the standard, the magnetic. SSDs are fast. Now, depending on the requirements, when you're working with companies, there are usually architects that actually makes all these decisions to say, oh, we're going for this type of storage, this is what we want, because what we need it for is heavily used by the application, or we need fast speed of this or whatever. Now, you don't have to worry too much about it, but you get to work with architects that makes all these decisions from time to time. Now, we're going to be requested for 8 gig. That's enough. We're not really storing anything, but you can request for as much as you can. Although AWS can have certain limits, if they don't allow you to have what you want, you can actually reach out to their support and they would release it. So this happens in the real world. If you want 800 gig, whatever, you can have that. Now, root, volume type, the device, all of these, we're going to see all of that in action. You can encrypt it if you want. We're not going to do that. Now, the whole encryption means that if the disk is encrypted and someone gets to hack into your cloud and they're able to lay their hands on the disk, if it's not encrypted, they'll be able to see your data. If it's encrypted, they won't be able to do anything with it, except, of course, they have the key that you have used to encrypt it, which is also another AWS service called KMS, which is Key Management Service. They tend to provide these keys to be able to use to encrypt stuff, but we'll get to use that as well in due course of time for other projects. All right, so next thing is to add tags. Now, these tags, let me just briefly talk about this. Tags are really important for production deployments. Most importantly for billing, okay? So for example, if you work with a big organization, they have multiple teams. There are teams looking after the, I don't know, maybe data science. There's another team, the DevOps team, data warehouse, all sort of teams doing different things. Each of the teams can have their own billing ID so that when there's a report going on, companies can now begin to analyze which department is actually using more cloud resources or which department is costing us more. Okay, if there are ways in which they can mitigate that, get them to reduce the use of servers or anything, at least they know where things are going. So for example, if I click on to add a key, let's say for example, the DevOps team have a billion ID, DevOps bill 101. So we can have a key called billing ID, and then the value can be DevOps billing 1. We create another tag and say department, which is the key, and then the value can be DevOps to say this is the team or something like that. So when we're running automation and we want to filter things, we can actually filter based on billing ID to say, okay, give me all the servers that the tag billing ID equals DevOps 101. So if we have 1,000 servers running and 500 of them is running DevOps billing 101, then you don't get all the 1,000, you get this. So you get the gist now. So tagging is really important. I'll just leave this as is so that we can go on to the next one. Now, security group. Security group is the firewall, all right? So you have to think of security every time we do things. AWS, as you know, is providing this service for us because they have a data center and we are renting their servers, right? Now, if we want people to access our server, this is where we configure it to say, okay, people from certain addresses can have access to this server. What it means is when they hit AWS network, this security group is going to kick in and it's going to check, are you allowed in? Yes or no. If you're allowed in, then it lets you pass through. Now, there are different layers to security, to firewall. You can actually set firewall on this level. You can set it on another level or a higher level than this, or even lower level than this. We'll get to see all that in action over time as well. But to give you more context, the server itself, you can configure further firewall. So we build up a server right now. When we finish building up this server, and let's say we have configured security group to give access to only a certain people, right? For example, only in the UK is allowed to access this server. No one from the US is allowed to access it. But think about this. People use VPN, right? I can then use VPN to say, okay, well, yes, I'm in the US, and it's only people in the UK that is allowed. So that means technically people from the US cannot be allowed into the server. Let's assume that's the case. If I use a VPN and change my to the UK, that means I now have access. So that is the level of security that has been bypassed, right? But then I can still further configure the same firewall on the server itself to say, okay, for whatever reason, you're allowed access into the server or into this network, because what we're doing at this level of security group is the AWS network. Now, on the server itself, we can still configure firewall to control has access or not. So the guy who got access by bypassing through VPN can still get blocked by the time he reaches the Linux server itself. So very important that you start picking up these things gradually, so that we sort of understand things over time down the line. Okay, so security group name, we can give it a name. Let's say DevOps SG, right? SG means security group. Okay, so all these terminologies, start picking them up gradually. SG, security group, don't forget. And then we can give a description. LAMP server SG, something like that. Okay, so who do we want to give access? Now, what's the type of access that we're talking about? Now, this is SSH. Does anybody not know what SSH is? I'd like to see in the chat box. Anybody? You do not know what SSH is, you're hearing it for the first time, you have no idea at all, please signify in the chat box. Okay, seems like everyone understands what SSH is, so I'm not going to bother to explain in detail, but basically it's just a protocol that allows you to access a server over the terminal so that you can do things. And we're going to do things. Now, you can use port 22 by default. So SSH listens on port 22. What is a port? Well, a port is just based on the TCP/IP protocol, which is a protocol in which computers use to communicate with each other. It is the that determines how applications listens. Now that may not really make a lot of sense, but let me give an illustration. Now, this is my house, right? And the only way you can get through to this house is through the door. Okay, I'm in the kitchen right now, so there's a front door and there's a back door. So this is the back door. Okay, it doesn't matter which door it is. So let's say the back door has an IP address of 192.68.67.22, something like that, or 23. That's the address of this house and this door. So if someone is searching for this house and they put that IP address, they will be able to locate this door, okay? This door of this house. But when you get to this house, you don't want to come through the door. You want to come through a different entry point. Now that's the port. Now this window could be my port. So if I get to this house with that IP address, and then I say, okay, I want to come through port 22. That means I'm not coming through the door, I'm coming through the window. Now another window could have port 58 or 53 or 50 whatever, or 80 or 443. So that represents the different ways you can get through the house. Make sense? That's exactly what's going on here. So if we're configuring firewall, we can decide who gets access. I hope I'm still connected to you guys. Okay. We can decide who gets access through what port. If we don't specify the port, that means you can't get in. Basically, that's what it means. Can you guys please put messages in the, okay, actually, right, okay. I guess everyone is not using the Slack chat. I just saw this on the Zoom chat. Please use the Slack channel to post your messages. Very important, because that's what I am looking at. Okay, SSH is basically the protocol that you can use to access a server. Okay, Flora, we'll leave you to go. You have the recording. At least you know where you stop. You can basically watch this again tomorrow so that you can go to work. All right. Now, is everyone still interested for me to carry on? We've actually spent some time, which is fine, no problem. But it's important we get all these foundation out of the way. Okay. So Are you happy for me to carry on, or you want us to take a break, come back tomorrow, or let me know what you guys think, okay, before we proceed. But yeah, keep going. Thank you very much. So we set our firewall to say port 22 get through. Now let's assume that I want to create another set of firewall configuration. Now, if I click on this, it has all sorts of applications or protocols that applications use. For example, let's go to MySQL. Okay. But I know MySQL is 3306. Let's see if it populates it. 3306. Oh no, it didn't. Okay. How about 53? Oh, no. How about 80? That's HTTP. Oh, I was expecting this to change again. Never mind. Let me do that. And then let me just select HTTP. Okay. So you can see automatically it's updated it to 80. And that's because HTTP listens on port 80. SSH listens on port 22. Okay. Let's try another one. HTTPS listens on port 443. Take note of this. On purpose, I am putting these so that you start to understand. These are potential interview questions. You have to know these ones, you have to know. What port does SSH listen on? What port does HTTP listen on? What port does HTTPS listen on? You know, these are default ports. They can be configured differently to change the port, but most applications, most deployments actually use this port. Then let's try another one. Where is that? Oh yeah, there we go. For some people from Windows background here, you might know what RDP is. RDP is what allows you to connect remotely between Windows computers. It's just like SSH. So SSH is used in Linux servers to connect from one computer to another remotely. RDP is the Windows equivalent, and that uses 3389. That's the default port. So if we wanted to configure our firewall to allow access to our server on this port, then we're saying, allow this port to go through, but from who? This is the source. If you hover over here, you can see here, it says, determines the traffic that can reach your instance. You can specify a single IP address or an IP address range in side annotation and all that. What's a side annotation? A side annotation is just a way to say IP addresses from a certain range can access the server. Now, if I say anywhere, you can see here it's turned it into 0000000 and all that. That anyone can access this server on port 22. Okay. Now we haven't configured anyone for the rest. That means if someone is trying to access on port 80, they will not be able to access the server on port 80. Make sense? However, everyone can access it on port 22. Now let's assume that we want to, I want to put my IP because it's going to load up my IP address there, and it's just, you know, secure the. I'm not going to do, or you can do that, and it's not something you want to share. You'll populate your own IP. All right. Another way you can try that is if you, let me see if I can bring up my terminal. My terminal is just not coming up, but let me just bring my, okay. 1 second, I need to minimize this. Okay. Let me quit my terminal and then bring it up. Is it up? some reason, I don't know. Okay, never mind. I'm just gonna use my my Visual Studio. Let's get all this out. Okay, so remember this terminal I was showing you the other time. Let me drag all of this. Okay. Now, if you can have zip.com and you hit this, you can try this. If you have a terminal, you can try this and just do curl can-has-zip.com. It's going to show you your IP address, your home IP address, and that's the public IP address. There's difference between public and private IP addresses. So that's your public IP address. All right. Now, if I selected my IP here, that's exactly what AWS is doing. They're basically running some command behind the scene to retrieve my IP address and then display that. I don't know what that code is doing, but it might be that it's curl can-has-zip.com, because curl can-has-zip.com is going to give me my IP address. If they did that and present my my IP address back to me, that's essentially how programming works. Okay. All right. So let's you can do that. Put your IP or put a range. So let's assume, now this is an assumption. Let's assume my IP address is 51.43.00/32. Now this /32 means a range of IP addresses. Now let's assume that there is a typical use case now. If you're working in a team and your company hired some consultants in another country, okay, and from their office, they need to connect to your server, okay, this is where you configure firewall to allow them access. If the public IP of their broadband or their router is 514300 and you want IP addresses from that range, that means maybe Charles has a workstation to connect, and then maybe who else? Solomon is another staff of the company, and then maybe Peter is another staff of the company. The workstation would have its own unique IP address, but within that range. So /32 may mean 28 IP addresses. Actually, there is a tool that can help us calculate a CIDR calculator. All right, so this is going to help us. I've used it before. Okay, so let's say, where is it? Let's see what this is going to give us. Okay. Now there is, it depends, there is what they call net mask as well. And by the way, you see, IT is wide and there are people who focus on different areas. What we're doing right now is what network engineers do. So if you are a network administrator, you would understand how to calculate net mask and subnets and mask speeds and all these different things, okay? Okay, so let's say we have, okay, 128.4 dots, maybe 43.2, something like that, /32. So, okay, is it here? Okay, how many bit? Oh yeah, okay, this is it. So 32. Okay, so I wasn't supposed to actually put the slash here. Okay, right. So as you can see, it's actually updated here to say IP addresses between maximum subnet. No, maximum addresses. Okay, let's change this to maybe 20. Okay, so if you want /23, and it gives us a maximum of 512 subnets. So subnets is like a further division of your network, and then maximum addresses is 510. And what this means is, assuming this is what we want to put in our security group, and we say this, and what's that, /23/23. Okay, that means all the 512 computers in this able to access on 443. That's basically what it's doing, okay? And then let's say another consultancy is working for the company and they need to do RDP, okay? Or maybe from the same company, but just another team. And their mask bit is, let's say, 28. As you can see only 14 addresses can access it. So if we change this to 28, right, you can see that only 14 people can actually access, which is RDP to the server. So you get the gist. Okay, so this is firewall controlling access and security. Okay, we can try that. So someone is saying 996632 9.9.6.6 and 32. Yeah, perfect. Is one IP address. So if you do this, then that means only one person can access it. So that's the whole gist of this. Well, I'm going to cancel all of this, and what I'm just going to do is SSH22 anywhere, okay? And that's sufficient for what we're trying to do, because actually we also need port 80 because we're going to be deploying an application, and all application using HTTP protocol listen on port 80 by default, except of course we change the configuration to listen on a different port, okay? And then we'll say anywhere as well. Okay, then review and launch. So this is our review page, everything that we have said. If you notice here, even though we had just two configurations, SSH and HTTP, and we selected anywhere, you can see now we have 4 entries. What's going on here is there is different TCP, is it technology? I think it's more of technology. So there's IPv4, IPv6. IPv6 is the modern TCP technology. Not a lot of people use that at the moment, but it's the future. And it's been around for a while. It's just that it's been hard to get people off IPv4. Now, because public IP addresses are shrinking by the day, we don't have a lot of it. IPv6 allows us to have more addresses that can be used. So this represents IPv6. When you see this : /0, it means anywhere on IPv6. But this is IPv4, 000, and that's the whole CIDR notation that we had a quick look at. Okay, so instance details, we have that. Storage, remember we requested for 8 gig and GP2 volume type. And by the time you start watching the actual AWS course, all of this will make a lot more sense to you, but at least you're getting some entry points into it right now. So let's launch our instance. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new key pair and download it. Key pairs. I have a dedicated video on SSH and key pairs and all that. So when you're watching your Linux courses, please make sure you don't skip these videos. Very important, so you understand the whole crypto technology around public key, private key, and all that. But essentially, private key is what you would use to access the server. rather than providing a password. It's just like logging onto your bank account or anywhere. You need to put give some sort of credential to be able to access, right? Username and password. Now, in the world of technology, password is not secure. It's actually vulnerable because if someone get hold of your password, then you're you're messed up, because then that person can do all sorts of things with your password. Now, imagine if you're using the same password for everything, your emails, your bank account, everything, then literally your whole life is in that person's life, hand, rather. Now, SSH uses both password and crypto, I was currency, crypto technology, whereby it uses private key, public key, and then it does some mathematical configuration to check keys. And then communication is based on this pair of keys. One is private, one is public. The private should always be kept private, never to be shared with anyone. The public is what you can share with anyone, and then you can use it to establish connectivity. So the public key resides on the server, and then the private key is with you, and then you use it to connect. Okay, please watch that video. There's a lot more detailed explanation to what I've just done. Okay, so we're going to create a new key pair. All right, the algorithm is RSA. There are other algorithms, but we're going to be using RSA. So I'll say set batch 2021. That's the name of the key, and then I'll hit on this download key pair. Now, download key pair is only going to download the private key for me. So let me just put it in, let's say desktop. Okay, and there. So I'm going to show in Finder, and then I will, where is it? Desktop. So I'm going to share this private key with everyone so that you can all have access to it. Okay, so open with. I'm gonna open with Notepad. Oops, I'm actually using it. Give me 1 second. Because I need to share the key with you guys so that you can also access this server. And by the way, we're going to be using this same key all the time. Okay. Or I may choose to change it at some point just for security reasons, in case we have a very nice hacker among us that's going to hack into our servers. Okay, so I don't see my, okay, what I can do is to load it from my shell. Because for some reason, this is messing up. Oh, come on. Okay, there we go. Okay. So I downloaded it in desktop. Okay. And that is our private keys. I'm going to get that out and paste it in the Masterclass channel so that everyone will be able to use it. So when I ask you to log on to the server, this is the key you're going to be using. All right. All right. So we have the key, and then let's launch instance. So what's going to happen is Amazon is going to build this instance for us. and then it will keep a copy of the public key on the server. Now we have the private. It's going to, we're going to be able to use that to log in. So someone's asking, how many people can log into the EC2 at a time? Well, I think there's a limit indeed, but this is an SSH configuration, but also there may be some limitations from AWS, but we can try that. So if anyone is not able to, someone's asking what is responsible for the encryption. So there's an encryption algorithm, which is RSA, and the algorithm is just the mathematical computation that goes on when the two keys are being generated. How does these keys work? Basically, you use one key, you can use one key to encrypt a message. Say, for example, I want to send a message to Mahbub, and the message I want to send to him is very, very secure. I mean, a message I don't want anyone to just hack into our conversation and see. And then I put into that message, hello, Mahbub. Now, the one of the keys, and then use it to encrypt that message, right? Now, because the key pairs, it is only the other key that you can use to decrypt that message. So what happens is, when you want to log on to a server, there's this communication that happens between you, the client, and the server. Now, the server wants to know whether you are the correct person, the right person that should be authenticated to the server. So what it does is it sends a message and you decrypt that message, and then you send back the answer to that message. Now, because the server understands what message it sent, if it matches, then it confirms that you have the right key and you're the correct person that should be authenticated. Then it allows you access. There is no other key that can be used to decrypt that message. It's just the pair. And that's, can't remember if it's the symmetric or asymmetric method, because there's two types. I actually explained it in the video. So one is symmetric, the other is asymmetric. One of them, you can use the same key to encrypt and decrypt. In this case, one has to do the, thank you, banks, is asymmetric. So one key does the encryption, the other does the decryption. So that's just how it works, basically, all right? So moving on, let's have a view of our instances. And now we have one instance, let's just give it a name, lamp stack. Okay, we have lamp stack, and that's the instance ID. Instance state is running, instance type is T2 micro, as you can remember. And you can actually add more columns if you like. So this is not all the columns. It has a public IPv4 DNS. So we'll get into DNS shortly. But it also has a IPv4 public IP address. So essentially, this DNS resolves into this IP address, okay? If you wanted to have a look at more columns, you can click on that gear right here, which is this gear, and then you can enable things. So say, for example, I want to see the private DNS name. I've enabled that, confirm. And if I scroll somewhere, I should be able to see. So you see, it has a private DNS name as well. Now, this private DNS name, we cannot reach it from the internet. Okay, it's only within the AWS network. All right, and then this public can be reached from the internet. So we don't have any application configured on it. So if you just do this, and we've opened port 80, and by the way, port 80 there, if I don't put port 80, by default, browsers will put the port 80 for us, because most applications, most websites on a HTTP protocol listen on port 80. just to demonstrate that, I'll put port 80, which is :80. You can see the 80 has disappeared as the browser has added the port 80. Now, because we are not running any application there, it says this site can't be reached because it's just a server. Nothing is on it. Okay, and that's the reason why. So we're going to put an application there shortly. So just to show you a bit more of the look of the console, you have details. There's the instance ID, the public IP, and everything. Most of the things you see there, the values, your security. That's the security group ID. Remember the security group where we're configuring the firewall? It has its own ID. And there's a reason why all these IDs and all that, we're going to be using all of them. You can see even this server, this instance has its own ID. Pretty much everything has an ID. Illustrated key, department, building ID. So this is everything, right? Okay, so what do we have going on? We have a server running, and the next thing is to log on to this server. And this is the point where I really have to get my my terminal working. Let me see what the problem is. Oh, good. I have my server now. Going to bring it up for you. I mean, my terminal. So what I'm going to do is bring this here so we can have things side by side. All right. Well, we're going to need more of this. So let's get, yeah, let's move this to the side. So if we need something, we can just click on this and then get what we want. Okay, so what do we want to do? I'm going to be running some Linux commands. I'll try to explain what they're doing. If you have questions, feel free to ask. Okay, if I'm moving too fast, let me know. PWD, where am I? Ah, good question. Raymond is asking what terminal. Now I am on a MacBook, and I'm using iTerm 2. It's called iTerm 2. Macs have a terminal by default, so you can use the default terminal that comes with it, or you can install iTerm 2. I like iTerm 2 because it has some functionalities. But if you're on Windows, you can use Git Bash, you can use Mobile Xterm. There's quite a number of them. Windows now have their own Linux distribution. I think you can now use the terminal as well. But really, you just need a client tool to log onto your server. So this terminal is our client, and we're going to use it to log onto our server. If you need help getting your terminal set up, there are videos. Okay, you can reach out, ask questions, and then we can send you videos that you can just watch. Very short videos to help you to download what you need to download so you can have your terminal. Okay. Yes, you can change to Bash on Mac. Yeah. So let me give you a bit of a background. So Linux is an offshoot of Unix. So I did a video on the history of Linux. If you watch that, you understand the journey so far. Now, most things you see around your Android, your iOS, most of these things have, you know, some history with Unix/Linux. Mac has the same. So the Mac operating system itself is also an offshoot of Unix, Linux. I'm not sure which one it is. I'm sure it's Linux. I think it's Linux or Unix. I don't know, but it's a flavor of those. Okay, so you can run Bash on your MacBook directly. Okay, Bash is a shell. Okay, there are different shells that you can use to interact with the operating system. And by the way, a shell is a program that we use to interact with the operating system. So, for example, I've basically typed this command pwd. Pwd is a program, okay? Because if I do, I don't think this switch command, I don't know if it works on Mac. No, it doesn't, but it does work on Linux distribution. So we'll try that. But basically, the which command would have told me where on the file system pwd program resides. If you were to open that program, you'll see that it's a binary file, and it helps us to interact with the operating, because you can't interact with the operating system directly, except you want to start writing some ones and zeros in machine language, right? So that's the reason why we now have these shells to be able to do things and tell our operating systems what to do. Okay, rather than clicking and clicking, we can write commands and basically get our operating system to respond to us to do certain things. Now, what we want to do is we want to log on to our remote server using SSH protocol. SSH is out of the box available on Mac. Even on Windows, when you install Git Bash, some shell tool that you can use to log on. So what you're going to do is come to your AWS console and select the server instance. You see this button right here, connect, just click on it, and then click on SSH client. Now it's done a few things. It says chmod 400 and then the name of the key. That's the key that we downloaded. That's the private key. It says run this command if necessary to ensure your key is not publicly viewable. What does publicly viewable mean? You have to understand how permissions work with Linux. This you need to understand before our next session. If you haven't watched all the Linux videos the whole of this week, please make sure you watch all of that so that we can catch up. Because this is a huge part of your journey. You're going to be dealing with this on a daily basis, okay? Understanding permissions, setting permissions of files and all that. Okay, someone is asking, which do you prefer, Windows or Mac laptop? Well, I prefer Mac because, I work on Linux systems most of the time, and because it has close integration with Linux, Unix, it's just easy. I don't have to download extra tools to be able to work on Linux servers, so it just works out of the box. Okay, and we're back to say which command works on Mac when using Bash. So, I mean, most of the Bash commands work. You can literally run a whole shell or Bash script on the MacBook and it works, So Bash, you can actually install different shells, the ZSH that you can install if it doesn't come with it. There's Bash as well, shell, so it definitely works. I mean, to try that, you can even run a command and just say bash and then specify the command, okay, and then it's gonna work, So yeah, let's see, sh. Okay, so this has moved into sh, so it doesn't. Let's exit. Oops. Okay, because I don't want to use bash, because this has actually moved me into a bash, but I use a different shell. Okay, so yeah. All right, so let's go back into connecting to our server. So talking about permissions, it wants us to set this 400 permission. What that means is 400. So there are three columns here. So don't see it as 400. It is actually 400. So 400 means the three columns. The first column is the user. The second column is the group. The third column is the others. Okay. Now, for user, meaning the user that owns the file. Now, I have downloaded the file with my username, so that means I created the file, right? Now, for the user of the file, I'm setting permission number 4. Permission number 4 means I'm able to read and write. So, actually, I think 4 is to read. So, if you're not sure of things, be sure, be when you start in real, most of these things will not stick in your head. It's okay to always go to Google to verify things. Okay, which is what I'm going to do here. So Linux permissions. Which one should we use? Let's try that. Okay, let's say numbers. I'm looking for the one that has numbers. Oh yeah, there we go. Okay, so number 4 means to read. Okay, and number 2 means write. Yeah. So what this means is the owner is able to read only. So no one can write, meaning to change the file. No one can do that. Even the user will only be able to read. 00 means no permission at all. So the group, which is the one in the middle, and others, that any other that doesn't belong to the group or the user, will be able to then have 0 on top of it. So Mobanks has sent a screenshot. So he's done which on PW. So I believe that's because of the shell you're using. So I'm using ZSH. Maybe you're using you're using Bash. I can see that. That's the reason why which is showing up there. But if anyone else is using the ZSH, you can actually try that. And these are things that you're going to have to get familiar with. The different shells. You just have to understand why you're getting errors sometimes, and then someone else, it's working for them. You just have to understand that sometimes your setup is going to be different. And there's a way to mitigate this. We'll get into that by the time we start talking about containerization later on, so that we can have a standardized environment. Okay, so this is the set only readable on this file. If we don't do that, SSH is going to throw an error. If your private key has a permission that allows people to read it, it won't allow you to log on to the server. It's a security mechanism that is put in place for SSH. Okay, so let's go back into our terminal. Where is it? And then I download this in desktop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to see into desktop. Take note of what I'm doing. CD is change directory, right? I'm currently in users diary. That's my home directory, and I know that. Sorry, 1 second. I know that in my home directory there is a desktop folder. Now I want to go into that folder because that's where I downloaded the private key. So I'm going to do cd desk. Now this is a trick. Always use tab to complete your sentence or command or word. Okay, so I'm going to hit tab now. Because desktop exists, it's going to complete it for me rather than typing the whole thing. Now let me show you something. If I did cd small letter d, all right, now it changed it to capital desktop. That's because I'm using Mac. If you were on the proper Ubuntu Red Hat CentOS Linux server, it won't do that for you. Okay, it is strictly case sensitive and it's not going to work. Okay, so you have to always remember that, very case sensitive. So I'm going to CD into desktop. Okay, yeah, so some people are already feeling sleepy. Once we finish LAMP, we're going to call it a day, and then tomorrow we will start from here, do the remaining, and then we'll keep on going gradually. I'm so sorry it's taking us this long, but I do hope that today's session will be, a good starting point going forward. All right, so now I'm in desktop, and then I can see that I have this. Now, it says set batch 2021.cer. If you notice in here, it's PM. For some reason, when it got downloaded, it changed it to CR. So take note of that. If that happens to you, just rename it to PM. Or if you don't, you can just copy this. Okay, because it's still going to work. You can just copy this, paste it, and then change this to CR. Because that's what it is on your server. So remember that. And then the next thing says to connect to your instance. Let's copy this. SSH-I this, and then Ubuntu, and then the public DNS name. All right. So clear the screen, paste this. Now remember to change that CR. Okay. And hit enter. Now we are in our Ubuntu server. So I'm no longer on my Mac computer. Okay. Remember, which PWD didn't work for me on my MacBook, but this time around it's going to work because I am no longer in my MacBook. I'm now in the Ubuntu server. This is the server that we created in AWS. In what was the region? I think it was it London? I don't know. But wherever the region is, that's where we are right now. Okay. So now that we're here, what do we need to do? What we want to do is to configure a LAMP stack, right? So we've done all of that. Okay, remember to read it. All these things, all these explanations I've already done. Okay, so when you read it again, you really understand what's going on. So let's go on. Okay, we've talked about the whole firewall thing. Okay, so what we want to do now is to install Apache. And let's do that. So first off, we're going to update the apt repository. So what is apt repository? Whenever we want to download something on the Linux server, it pulls the software from some repository. Okay. So there are many repositories used by different Linux distributions. On Ubuntu, it uses the apt repository. On CentOS, it uses the YOM, which you can use to configure a repository. You can use the public repository. You can configure private repository. And what is a repository? It's just a place where software applications are kept. So you can write your own application that does certain things and then put it in a repository so that when you want to download it, it just downloads it from that repository. That's basically what's going on. So this command is going to update the apt repository so that if there are still information, it's able to get that. So let's do that. I'm going to copy that and paste that. Now, initially, as we're starting out, some things is going to be like, oh, I'm just copying and pasting. Don't worry, it's fine. Some things, It's just to make your life easy. In the real world, that's how you're going to copy and paste as well. Okay. You're not a developer. We've given you some code snippets for some applications. You don't have to worry about that. What you need to focus on is the processes that we're going to be building. So someone is asking, how is the terminal on my laptop interacting with the Ubuntu server? My terminal has now opened what we call a tunnel. So SSH has opened a tunnel between my computer and the remote computer. So they're now communicating through this secure tunnel using that SSH key. Any data that gets passed between them is encrypted. Okay, that's how they're communicating. It's the protocol. A protocol is just a set of rules that allows you to do something. SSH is that protocol that allows us to communicate remotely between two computers. Okay. All right. So we've updated the app repository, and then what we want to do is to install Apache. So I believe you know what sudo means. Someone is saying I'm not getting a response from SSH command. Yeah, you just post it, screenshot them, and then someone can help you. If it's something that we can trace here, we'll try to help you. But yeah, it's a good thing you're practicing, but try not to miss out what we're trying to do as well. So like I said initially, figure out you if it's going to be, you know, working along, that's perfect. But quickly determine what works for you, basically. So sudo is what allows us to run commands using elevated permissions. What does that mean? Now, let's try something. How am I logged onto this server? I'm actually logged on as a user called Ubuntu, okay? A user called Ubuntu. Charles says, I have a VM box on my Windows. It doesn't allow me to SSH. When I use mobile XM, SSH is easy. I'm not sure why that is. So when you use mobile XM, are you connecting to the same VM or to AWS? If you're connecting to the same VM, it might be the fact that your servers have the same IP address. Is it best to type the command out versus copying and pasting? When I started, I used to like to type commands just so that I don't remember, I don't forget, so that I can remember things, okay? But when you start working in the real world, that's a very bad habit. When you do things, you copy exactly and paste, okay? Obviously, before you run it, you want to have a look at your code again to be sure it's what you intend. But in the real world, you want to copy and paste because humans, we're prone to error. Okay, so if it's a production thing you're working on, you want to make sure that you're able to copy exactly what you need to copy and paste it, because sometimes it might just be you use a small letter where you're supposed to use a capital letter, and that can mess the whole deployment up. So basically, initially while you're learning, you can type in so that you can get used to, you know, some of these commands. But over time, you want to make sure that you're always copying and pasting, but you understand what you're doing. Okay, understanding is the key, not memorization. You don't have to memorize any command. Don't try to memorize any command. It sticks over time when you continually practice these things, right? But if you don't practice, it doesn't stick. And when it sticks and you understand it, you copy things, you paste it, you understand where you're going, you're good to go. So to install Apache, what are we copying? So this is what we're copying right here. I'm on this page. In case you don't know, I'm gonna paste that page. Okay, thank you, Tosin. And what we're copying is this part. So you can see here, it says run Apache 2 package installation. Now, if we say apt install Apache 2, how does APT, which is our package manager, how does it know where to get Apache from? Remember, we did an apt update, and then we just say apps, install Apache 2, give me Apache 2. Okay, Apache 2 is the name of the application. So there used to be Apache, which is the old one, but there's a new one now, which is more robust, and that's Apache 2. And the moment I paste that here and hit enter, it immediately knows where to find Apache 2, and then it asks me, it says, after this operation, 883 kilobytes of additional disk space will be used. Do you want to continue? Yes or no? And then I type yes, and then it goes ahead. You can see here, let me scroll up. You can see where it's fetching it from. It's doing get, copying from this archive, and then it resolves the dependencies. So that's the function of a package manager. So what package managers do, like APT, is they resolve dependencies. Remember when I talked about importing libraries previously, when developers want to create a functionality rather than reinventing the wheel and writing everything from scratch, they use other code that other people have written, and then they extend on top of it. Those code that are importing, those are dependencies. So, which is a package manager, and where to find these dependencies. So as it's installing Apache, it's also installing all the dependencies. Okay, and that's a very big win for in this age and time that we are doing IT. Because back in the days, in the 90s, there was nothing like a package manager that is really advanced like this. I wasn't even doing IT then, but they used to use package managers that would only allow you to install one software at a time. So you have to figure out the dependencies, and you have to install all the dependencies yourself. Okay, and applications would always fail. Will have bugs just because a dependency is missing, and then you have to figure it out. And I'm sure it was hell for those who were working in IT at the time. But now we don't have to worry about all that, because package managers understand where to get these things, and it just goes on the internet and installs them. Now, notice one thing: corporate organizations, if you're working with banks, governments, organizations that actually take security seriously, they don't rely on public repositories to download these libraries and applications. What they do is they build private repositories and then update the apt configuration to point to their private repository where they store all the applications. So essentially what they're doing, they go to the public place, download all the packages there, and put it in their own private repositories. Anytime they're doing apt install, it's not pulling down the application from the public. It's actually pulling it down from the private repository so that their network is not exposed to the internet. Because the internet, that's where crazy things are happening. That's where hackers and all that is happening. So as much as possible, companies want to avoid having to go over the internet to do things. Okay. So now we have APT that has installed Apache. What we now want to do is to use Systemctl to get the status of Apache 2. What is Systemctl? Can anyone help me with that? So Systemctl is telling us that the status of Apache 2 is active and is running. Can someone help me what Systemctl is, what it does? Can you help me? We're going to be using a lot of Systemctl. So it's a tool that allows us to manage services. Okay, so you can configure your application. You can write an application, deploy it onto a server, and make it run as a service. What does it mean to run as a service? It means that it allows us to continually run a process. A process is an instance of an application running on the server. Okay, And then you can use Systemctl to do a lot of things. You can use it to control. So systemd is the actual tool. Systemctl is like the client tool that you can use to interact with systemd, which does so many things. It's beyond the scope of what I'd like to talk about now. But for the sake of what we're doing right now, it allows us to create services, to start services, to stop services, and to check the status of services. Apache 2, in this case, is a service. It's a web server that we're installing that will help us to run and render our applications, and it's running as a service. So many things run as a service, even SSH. The only reason we're able to communicate with this server and connect to it is because SSH is an application that is running as a service on this server and is listening on port 22. Let's have a look at that. So if I do systemctl status SSHD is the name of the service for SSH, and the D there stands for daemon. Okay, you can see here it says it is active and is running. Okay, now this in red is just talking about happening. So I'm suspecting that some people have been trying to connect to this server as we're doing this, and it says connection closed by remote host because for some reason maybe the private key was not written properly. I don't know, for whatever reason. We can check the logs and see what's happening because everything gets logged. So we can check the log and see what's happening, why that. But when I connected, you can see here it says accepted public key for Ubuntu from that IP address, and all of that. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. So Oladipo maybe used to introspect and control the state of the systemd, system, and service manager. Correct. Thank you very much. All right, and Mubank is also helping us with that. Thank you. You guys are on fire. All right, so Uzo, don't worry. There's a lot of failure ahead of you, just so you're warned. Okay, so but I enjoy it. Every failure is an opportunity to learn something. So you need to find out why it didn't install properly, what you did wrong, and you keep building experience from there. If you need help, by all means, shout. Okay, so where are we now? We've already done our ports 22 and 80 firewall configuration, which is what this GIF is trying to do here. But what we now want to do is we want to do curl to see if our application is now running. Actually, let's go to this that was showing site can be reached previously and refresh it. Now that we refresh, you can see we now have Ubuntu's default page running. And that's to show that we now have a web server that can render applications. So if we put an application on this server right now, it's going to be able to render this page. Now, I want you to start getting used to this tool called curl. It's a very, very good tool to always use. So basically, it's going to, so let's see, curl localhost port 80. So if I do that, what does curl mean? Curl is a client tool that we can use to interact with web servers, okay? So with endpoints. You can put an endpoint there, do curl, and it basically executes some HTTP verbs. We're going to talk about HTTP verbs tomorrow. Get, post, delete, all that stuff. Now, by default, if you don't specify any particular verb, it does the get verb, which means to get something, all right? Now, what we want to do is we want curl to get this endpoint localhost on port 80. The only reason we can use localhost is because we are on the server. On the server, remember, Ubuntu has connected to this server, and on this server, when you're logged in on that server, you are on that local host, okay? So if I do call HTTP localhost colon 80 and hit enter, we're going to see the same web page that we saw on the browser. See that? But obviously, because it's a terminal, we can't see it the way that browser is able to give it to us. Okay, because browsers, they have an engine as well that allows us to see things like that. But it will give us the HTML code, and you'll be able to see some things. So for example, let's see, maybe something will show up because I'm seeing some CSS code as well. Let's go back to that page. What do we have on this page? It says default page. Okay, default. Okay, so let me clear the screen again. Go back to that. What I want to do now is, because there's a lot of data that came back, so I'm going to filter from all the data and just extract default with keyword default. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the pipe and then grep. Grep is to say filter. Grep, grep. Yeah. All right. So I want to grep default, and what's happened is it's not throwing back the entire page that came back before, but at least we can see what exactly is on the page. So you can see here it says Apache Ubuntu default page. It works. Let's see, do we have that? Oh yeah, see that? It works. So this it works here. That is it. This is it right here. See, it works. And then we have Apache Ubuntu default page, Apache to Ubuntu default page. So yeah, our site is working perfectly, and that's exactly what we want to see. And if we're not on the site, it's all do the same thing. So let me go back to let me open a new tab. Here, I'm not connected to this server. Actually, let's do that. So I'm going to use the pound symbol to paste this, but I don't want to execute it. Okay, so it's just going to save it. Like I'm dumping that because I'm going to use it shortly. What I want to do is to copy this. Okay, and try to run the same command, because this is running on this server here. And this is my MacBook terminal. This session right here is my MacBook. I run the same thing, and as you can see, it's not bringing back anything. It's actually going to time out because I'm on my Mac and there's nothing running on port 80 on my local host. Is what I've just run right now. Yeah. Now I'm going to cancel that and then bring back the one that I saved previously. Remove the hash, and then I do curl. As you can see, using the public IP address, or actually not IP address, this is the DNS name, okay? It brings back the data. If I wanted to use the IP address, it's going to give me the same thing. So let's go and find this for this server. So the public IP is this. I've copied that. And then if I do, and don't forget, this is my PC, this is my server, this is my MacBook. And if I do curl the IP address, even if I don't put :80, by default, it listens on port 80. It's going to bring back the same thing. So this is, in a nutshell, a starting point of what DevOps engineers do. We deploy applications. We configure servers so that we can deploy applications. You can see there's a number of things going on. We're running Linux command, we're running this and that, and there's still a lot more to come, okay? So, well, what I'd like to do is actually stop here today because information overload is not good as well, all right? So let's stop here today. We had it initially when we started, but don't worry, we'll get there. The next part is to get MySQL, which is a relational database. And we're going to see, the relationship between databases and applications and all that, So yeah, if anyone have any question right now, I think it's time to actually ask questions. If you want to talk, you can unmute yourself, and then we can talk about things. And that's it. I hope it's been a fantastic time today. Sorry about the challenges we faced initially. Yes, so Ashley has a question. Yes, you can actually unmute yourself and
yeah, Derek, can I come in?
yes, please. You can let us know who's talking, and
Yes, Olans, I'll go after Obin. I believe it's Obin, so I'll go after him.
Okay.
Okay, Derek, my name is Justice, and
Okay,
I'm calling
hi,
from
Justice.
Nigeria. Yeah, I'm calling.
Hi, Justice.
I'm good. And you?
Very well, thank you.
Yeah, it's been a wonderful night, like you said. I've gone through some of the trainings that you're talking about, but I have some hit along the line.
Okay.
Even before this video.
Right.
I got my AWS account ready. I downloaded my EC2 instance, but got stuck along the line where I wanted to copy the pen file, that is the keypad.
Yes.
It couldn't run on my machine. I'm using a i5 HP. I don't know why. I googled it to find out what a pen file is and how I can get it working on my machine. But up till now, I'm stuck. So I've been waiting for this opportunity to ask this question.
So, well, now it's hard to actually try to troubleshoot the problem you're facing, just by description. It'll be nice if maybe a screenshot or something, just because of time, I would have said, maybe share your screen, let's have a quick look, but definitely this is, a lot of people have been, I'm sure a lot of people are tired, I'm tired myself, so, but we can either have a session tomorrow, have a look at it, or you can share a screenshot in the channel, because that's what most people do. You can post a screenshot, try to give an explanation about what your setup is, and most of the time it might just be one little thing, that you have to do to solve the problem.
Sorry, Dari, can I chip in into that, because I face the same problem? So I think the problem is at the point where he was watching the video in a virtual box into using an RSA key to pair. However, on Amazon, you can create a pair key using the RSA command, that key to be able to store your PEM in maybe downloads or whatever. But I think you were doing it manually. Over time, when it gets to Ansible, I think it will now start understanding automating the process without having to do that on VirtualBox. I think that's the same problem with having.
Right. That's definitely possible. So, I mean, again, another thing I'd like to say here, and thanks a lot, Papi. I believe that was Papi, right? Feel free, please, to reach out to each other if you need help, right? Form study groups, okay? You can, if you can get a buddy. If you feel like, some people are, I don't know, some that on this platform. I mean, there's a lot of people who form themselves into groups. They sort of help each other study, have problems. Feel free. That's the whole purpose of this platform. It's not just to join live sessions and listen to trainings and all that. You have to socialize. You have to be able to get help from different people. Okay. So yes. So if you can get help from Papi, by all means, reach out. You guys, he can share some of the experiences, and then that's how the whole thing goes round.
Right. And so that didn't touch in my own question. I'm just curious about something.
Sure.
I use Azure DevOps, right? And we've just migrated into using AWS. So when you were working on Azure just then, I really didn't understand. I don't understand why those terms are still being used side by side. I understand Azure DevOps might be a tool, requirement management tool, or we're using AWS as well. I don't know if you can give any clarification on that, just to understand the difference between two different processes, but in the same line. But why are we using both things in the same environment?
Okay, so right, I think I kind of understand what you're asking. So first of all, you need to understand one thing about Microsoft. Okay, Microsoft's, I mentioned it the other time that Microsoft, they know how to copy very well, right? And do something really well, which is the name they give to the products that they sell. If you have been working with Microsoft for a long time, you sort of understand how they name their product. Let's start from the database. They name their RDBMS solution MS SQL Server, right? That's Microsoft SQL Server. SQL is the language for databases, and then they name the RDBMS after SQL. Azure DevOps, okay, they named that DevOps. They added that DevOps to Azure on purpose. It's actually not a tool per se. It's a combination of different tools. With Azure DevOps, you can run your pipeline. You can set up your pipeline. You can use like Jira. If you're familiar with Jira, Azure DevOps can help you manage your application, where you can create your stories, your epics, and all that. And then your users can begin to write their stories and take the requirements and everything. With Azure DevOps, you have that as well, right? You can do, all these different things that are not really, they're individual products that have come together to become one. Now, if a company is using AWS for, let's say, spinning up their servers and all that, and then they're using Azure DevOps for their pipeline and managing their application workflow, there are two different things going on, okay? Because their pipeline is where they're building and testing and releasing their software. You could use other tools to do the same thing, like Jenkins. Jenkins does that. But rather than using Jenkins, you can use Azure DevOps. Microsoft charges per user for using Azure DevOps. So, like I said, they name their technologies for marketing reasons. Windows Active Directory. It does Active Directory, which is a directory service, but they named it Windows Active Directory, AD. You understand? Because they want people to immediately resonate with what's going on, okay? And then be able to subscribe to that tool because you can quickly relate with it. And I think that's where your confusion is coming up from, that, okay, using AWS and then using Azure DevOps as well, when, it's all, isn't it supposed to be the same thing? AWS is a cloud, as a cloud, while we're using Azure Cloud, Azure DevOps, and AWS. Whereas, in your case, I may be wrong, but I'm thinking you're actually probably not spinning up servers in Azure. You're spinning up servers in AWS, but you use Azure DevOps, which is a SaaS product that allows you to build, test, and release your application. So I don't know if that answers your question to some extent. Yes.
Yeah, these small banks. So you can integrate Azure DevOps and AWS. Even at work, we use Azure DevOps for the CI parts, then we deploy to AWS. They work together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Which is essentially what I'm trying to explain as well, that you can have your server in AWS, but then you use Azure DevOps to build, test, and release your application. Because when you're releasing to AWS. Okay. So I think the confusion I don't know who asked the question. The confusion I'm thinking is, why are we using AWS and Azure together, right? Azure DevOps is actually a product that you're using to build, test, and deploy.
Yeah. It's like a combination of AWS code pipeline.
Exactly. Code build, code pipeline. Exactly.
Everything together. Yeah.
Exactly.
So some people they prefer Azure DevOps to use code pipeline or code commit.
Exactly. Or Jenkins.
Yeah. Or Jenkins. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Well, that kind of makes sense to say that Azure DevOps in that term is the build tool we use to do whatever deployment we want to do into AWS.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Coach. Thanks,
Mohammed.
Yeah.
Hey, so I got one question. This is Chad. Are we going to be meeting every Saturday?
Yes.
Live?
Yes, every Saturday and Sunday.
Okay, every Saturday and Sunday. What is it? The same time?
Same time.
So Sunday is a bit earlier, 8 p.m. before the 10 o'clock that we met today.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Any more questions?
Yeah, I got one question. Because I want to, is it allowed, okay, if I use my AWS account to implement my projects?
Oh, yes. AWS, that's what you're going to use.
Because I see that everyone using this same private key poses security issues. So I decided if I can use my AWS to implement the projects.
Of course, use your own AWS to implement the project. Yes. That's what you're going to do.
So I can grant you access if you want to do anything. Yeah.
Yeah, you can grant anyone access if you want, them to have access to your server to do anything. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So, gentlemen and gentle ladies, thank you very much for joining. It's been a pleasure, and we're gonna meet tomorrow. And apologies once again for the hiccups we had initially. What we can do, I literally just moved into this property like 2 days ago, and it's all over the place right now. I actually had 3 different, 2 different internet providers thinking that it's going to be perfect. But apparently, the broadband in the house is much stronger than that one. But anyway, it'll be a better experience tomorrow because I'm just going to leave it here.
I guess you don't have Virgin.
Well, so the property I was living before, I was using Virgin. I decided to use Sky now because Virgin does not have fiber optic here.
Oh, okay.
So well, we'll see. Thank you
All right, thank you very much.
All right, now everyone, you have a lovely night.
Yeah, thank you. I can
Thank you.
go. Yeah, speak to you. See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Good.
Recording stopped.